This week's topic is economics. In our first video, we will begin by looking at economics. I'm not sure how many videos we're going to have this week to get through the slideshow, so we will stop at around the 10 to 15 minute mark. So maybe more than one. We'll see. At its basic, economics is understanding choices. The choices that people make, or that businesses make, or that governments make, or that institutions make. So the choices that a public school district makes, the choices that a state government makes, the choices that a local business makes, the choices that a national or multinational business makes, and of course, the choices that individuals make. And all these choices in economics are really about how those people or governments or businesses manage their resources, their financial resources. And when we think of resources, we often think of things like money. It could also be natural resources. It could be human resources in the cases of a business, but time is also a resource. So it does involve time management as well. And the choices that people make are governed by scarcity. And scarcity is one of the fundamental concepts of economics. If things weren't scarce, we wouldn't have to make choices about them. Because time is scarce, we have to make choices about how we spend our time. Because money is scarce, we make choices about how we spend our money. Because other resources are scarce, businesses have to choose how are they going to use the resources that they have. And I'm saying scarcity here. Scarcity in economics doesn't mean necessarily that something is rare. It just means that it's not unlimited. So someone who is super, super wealthy has lots of money, but we still say that money is a scarcity because it's not unlimited. There are two major branches of economics. Macroeconomics looks at the big picture. It is the entire economy of a country, maybe of a state. It's the entire, maybe of a broader than a country, maybe of an entire region in the world. This looks at things at the national level. It's usually national level, things like unemployment, gross domestic product, which we'll talk about later, interest rates, things that are at a national or a statewide level. Microeconomics looks at individual choices. It looks at the choices that individual people make or that individual businesses make. Another fundamental idea of economics besides scarcity is the related ideas of supply and demand. Supply answers the question, how much of a good is available? That could be how many pumpkins are available for sale, how many computers are available, how many trucks are available, how many hammers are available, how many books are available. That is supply. And demand is how much of a good do people want? How much are they willing to buy? How much do they want and or need to buy? So there may be 5,000 copies of Carl's biography available. The demand for that biography might be 1,000 copies, or it might be 10,000 copies. Supply and demand don't always match. The law of demand tells us that the higher the price of something, the lower the demand. So if Carl's autobiography were priced at $100, there's going to be a pretty low demand. If Carl's autobiography is priced at 10 cents, there's going to be a higher demand, typically. And the opposite is also true. So the higher the price, the lower the demand, the lower the price, the higher the demand. Is this true for everything? Not necessarily. There are some things that are seen as necessities that when the price goes up, the demand is going to stay roughly the same. Even then, if the price goes up enough, demand will shift. But it will shift less than if it were something that were more of a luxury item. The law of supply is related to this. The higher the price of something, the greater the supply is going to be. And I like using agriculture as an example here, particularly of crops that are grown yearly, for example. So if a farmer grows wheat and the price of wheat is really low, the next year that farmer might decide it's not worth my time to grow wheat. I'm going to grow corn instead. And so that low price is going to lead to a decrease in the supply of wheat. On the other hand, then, if lots of farmers find the same thing, and so almost no one is growing wheat, what's going to happen? Their wheat prices are going to go up. And so then there will be a much greater supply because farmers want to sell wheat. And then the cycle will kind of continue. Here we see a graph, and the graph is the supply and demand graph. We call these curves. So the demand curve, these are idealized. The demand curve is the line that starts at the point 40, 120. And what it tells us is that for this imaginary good, that at a price of $120, there is a demand of 40 units of that good. At $80, it's not $80, at $100, there is a demand for 80 units of the good. At $80, there's a demand for 120 units of the good. And when the price is down to $60, there is demand for 160 units of the good. So notice that as the price decreases, the demand increases. People want more of something when it is less expensive. The supply curve is the curve that's in orange. It starts at the lower point of the two curves, and it starts at the point 40, 40. At a price of $40, although there is a demand, sorry, let me phrase this. At a price of $40, there's only going to be a supply of 40 items. At a price of $40, there's only a supply of 40 items. Notice this is, when we look at the demand curve, that is off of our chart, doesn't go that far. But the price for $40, there would be around, keeping the same slope, demand of 180 items. But there's only going to be 40 items made or produced. When the price goes up to $60, then people are more willing to produce that item. Now the quantity supplied goes up to 80. At $80, at $80, the quantity demanded is 120, and that's also the quantity produced or supplied. This is called the equilibrium price, or the equilibrium point, or the point of equilibrium. This is where supply equals demand. That's the sweet spot. That's where everyone would like to be at. Every business would like to operate here. Every farmer would like to operate here. Every manufacturer would like to operate here. This is the point where supply and demand meet. This means that the business is going to be the most efficient. It's not going to produce too much of something, or it's not going to produce too few of something. Now, as prices continue to rise, there's going to, at least for a while, be lots of supply. So when prices go up to $100, the supply goes up to $160. But notice that when this price is at 100, the demand is only for 80. So actually there's twice as much produced as there is demand in this curve. So if a business prices its products too high, whether intentionally or whether because they have to because of costs, that is going to potentially dramatically decrease demand. This is also why businesses have to be careful. Sometimes businesses will be roasted for saying, oh my gosh, how dare you charge that much for whatever. And from the business point of view, if they charge less, they might not be able to meet the demand. And that leads to shortages, which people get really upset about. So in elementary school, you're not going to teach a lot about supply and demand, certainly not with curves like that, but you are going to teach about these concepts: needs and wants, and goods and services, starting in kindergarten and first grade. We all know that a need is something required for survival. Basic needs are food, shelter, clothing, and water. A want is something that's desired, but is not required for survival. So I need food. I might want a book to read. I need water. I might want a comfortable chair to sit in. One misconception that kids will have is that they will confuse these sometimes, particularly when it's in the same category. So we need food to live. Maybe a kid's favorite food are oranges. And so a kid might say, oh, oranges are a need. But oranges aren't a need. Food is a need, but any specific type of food is a want. It's not a need. Clothing is a need, but a particular brand of clothing, a particular style of clothing is a want. The other thing that's often taught is goods and services. And I like to remember this is that a good is something that is concrete. In other words, you can touch it. It's tangible, which means it can be touched. Things, objects that are bought and sold are goods. So candy bars, milk, cars, pencils, computers, those are all goods. We can buy and sell them, and they are things we can trade back and forth. We can touch, we can taste, we can feel. Maybe we shouldn't taste them always, right? You don't want to taste the computer, but they are things that you could. A service is something that isn't concrete. You can't touch it. It is something that somebody does for somebody else using often their expertise for a price. This includes services like banking, education, healthcare, law enforcement, fire protection. Many of those things are public services, but there can also be private services in addition to banking. Things like real estate services, um, mechanics perform a service, um, handymen for service, lawn care, someone to shovel snow. Right? If you do any of those things, those are all services. And then we'll end this first video with opportunity cost. The money that you spend on something or the resources you use for something can't be used for something else. So, for example, if I have $10 and I choose to spend that $10 at Taco Bell, that is $10 I don't have anymore to spend on toilet paper. Have had an opportunity cost. An opportunity cost isn't good or bad necessarily, it just is. If I spend money on one thing, I don't have it for something else. This also can refer to time. So by going to school, you are cutting into your potential work hours, even in an online class, right? Because you are listening to a lecture, you are reading, you are studying, you're doing assignments. So you may not be sitting in a classroom in an online class, but you're still taking time that you could spend instead working and earning money. That is an opportunity cost. So by opportunity cost, we don't mean what you spend on something, but rather what are you potentially giving up by that spending? That is opportunity cost. So in this first video, we talked about economics looking at ideas of scarcity and choice and how people and others manage their financial resources. We talked about the two big branches of macroeconomics and microeconomics. We talked about supply and demand and how those things connect. We talked about goods and services, and finally, opportunity cost. The next video, we will start off with some of the types of world economies and some famous economists in history. If you have questions, please let me know, and thanks for watching.